In this episode of Two Tall Guys Talking Sales, Kevin Lawson and Sean O'Shaughnessey take a hard look at one of the most overlooked causes of poor sales performance, putting the wrong salesperson in the wrong role. Using a basketball analogy, they break down why hunters, farmers, lone wolves, challengers, and trappers all bring different strengths, and why sales leaders create problems when they pretend those differences do not matter. You will hear why sales success depends on matching your team structure, compensation plans, and sales processes to the way your customers actually buy. Before you assume you have a motivation problem, a talent problem, or a pipeline problem, this conversation may help you see the real issue: role design.
Welcome back to Two Tall Guys Talking Sales. If you've listened to our podcast for any length of time, or if you actually personally know me, if you've met me before, you probably have some idea that I enjoy the sport of basketball. I like watching it. I used to play it when I was a kid. I don't play it anymore. Some of you know that I was a high school basketball ref for a while until I retired from doing that. And it would make sense. Two tall guys, we like basketball. So the one thing that confuses people if you don't know the sport of basketball is the names of the positions that are on the floor. And sometimes those get turned into numbers as well. So you'll hear that there's a 1, there's a 5, there's a 4. And people go, what are those? That's confusing. And they'll also say, what's a center? Is that person always in the center of the play? A guard, he only plays defense? Is that right? And those aren't correct. And the key thing that you bring up here is not knowing what they're called can cause confusion and understanding of the game and enjoyment of the game. If you don't know, you got to figure that out. Same thing happens in football. Same thing happens in soccer. Not knowing what the roles are is a big deal. So that same kind of thing happens in a sales arena where you may not understand what type of salesperson you have or what type of salesperson you need. And you might have heard terms like challenger, or lone wolf, or hunter, or trapper. And they get confusing because, what do I have? What do I need? Do I need 3 of those and 2 of those? Or what's going on? So we're going to talk about that a little bit. So Kevin, you're a too tall guy. You're taller than I am. And so people probably look at you and say, oh, he was a center when he was in high school. Yes. Basketball, right? So tell me about that type of archetype and how that affected your world.
So the phraseology around a center is being in the paint. You got to beat and bang, pulling down rebounds, distribute out to the 1 or the 2, the pointing, the shooting guard, getting the swingman, setting a pick, right? That was the language that was part of my formative basketball years because I've always been tall. I didn't have a growth spurt anytime. My whole life was a growth spurt. But you take that kind of archetype of a tall guy. If you are walking down the street, you see somebody tall, you assume they at one point played basketball. For me, that'd be a right assumption. People rarely assume that I played soccer, and that was my passion. I was a right fullback, defensive only fullback when I played soccer. So it's important to note that just because somebody looks like something doesn't mean that's actually what they are. But in sales, let's go ahead and jump over to the sales track here and talk about what people show up as. You mentioned a few terms: the hunter, the farmer, the trapper, the challenger, the relationship seller, the transactional seller, all those things. And it's important to know that there's also other things like A sellers, B sellers, B plus, C, enterprise, territory. There's all kinds of labels that go out there. And what we don't want to confuse is the type of seller with the business model. Because when you run a business that is highly transactional, think if you're doing a lot of web marketing and a lot of transactions that auto transact or have a subscription, you're in a largely transactional business or a B2C business where sales cycles are not weeks or months or years long. They're not heavily relationship driven. They're heavily trust driven, brand trust driven. So the type of seller you might need is more like a farmer or a customer service agent or somebody who defends the business. So you've got a marketing and sales aligned motion versus a outbound, let's go prospect and get enterprise level deals. I'm starting to use a lot of terminology here because you as a seller need to understand your business model so that you know how to sell. That's why it's important for you as a seller to know what type of business you're in, because your type is really important to know how to show up for customers, the language you use. Here's the scenario. I used to sell construction wholesale supplies. In that framework, I had a lot of things that were commodities, football items, things that were high visibility items. So think copper. It's a commodity. It's a publicly traded commodity. They do futures on it. Copper spot prices drove market prices that I was selling. So we would sell a deal that's 30 days, 60 days, 90 days out, and we would sell it based on price. But if I was only relying on my core relationship with the buyer, there's a likelihood that I wasn't going to win the deal because I couldn't make a larger margin or a, frankly, an acceptable margin on that product and be competitive. I had to rely on all the other things that I sold to align to that highly visible, highly price sensitive product. In the same way, if I'm a hunter and as opposed to a farmer, if I'm a hunter and I'm out there really trying to, I call it kicking in doors, meeting new people, developing new relationships, opening doors, finding new opportunities. If I'm a hunter and I sell in a highly relational business, there's a risk that I'm going to burn out or not make good relationships or not sustain them. So I need, as a seller, support structures and infrastructure to help me maintain those relationships. So that's important to call out those differences immediately to know what kind of business you're in and what kind of business, if you're a owner listening to this podcast versus a seller that's doing the work, you need to know what your teams are made up of. You need to know what kind of business you built, or if you're a VP of sales, what kind of business you've been hired into to know, do I need to staff to a highly relational sales market? Do I need to staff a bunch of hunters because my sales cycles, I sell it once and I'm done? If I sell an accounting system and I'm just selling the install of it, I sell it once, maybe every 3, 5, 10 years. It's not a year over year. There might be some follow-on sales, but you're not selling the big product every year. So it's important to know what you're doing or how to staff well. Sean, any of that resonating with you, or are you shaking your head over there?
No, I'm all good. This is exactly what I think about a lot with my teams that I have managed in the past and I coach for my clients now. And that is, what skill set do we need to emphasize within the organization? And do we need to have a mix of people with different skill sets that are going after different things? So I'm going to say the same thing that Kevin was just talking about, but I'm going to give other examples and things to be worried about. So if you have a product that you will never sell to that company again, you just literally will not. You're going to sell it once. The example that Kevin talked about is the ERP or the accounting system sell, where you would sell it once and then you're done and you're not going to sell that customer again. You may sell support, you may sell services, but you're not going to do another big transaction with that company because it's the one product you sell. And they're going to use that for a long time. And they're probably not going to replace your product with your product. So here's the reality. That is a hunter type of sell, because you're going to create a relationship for X amount of months, maybe a year, with that customer as you're prospecting in that customer and learning about that company. But then you are going to leave. And hunters, good hunters, like to hunt. They don't like to care. They don't like to take care of and manage and do the rest. On the flip side, if you're a farmer, if you have a product where I'm going to sell to you and I'm going to sell to that same buyer every month, every 6 months, whatever the case may be, for 5 years, then in that case, you really want somebody who can build and keep that relationship going over a long period of time. And they're excited when you walk in the door or you give them a call, because you want that to build up. So you have to understand what you need. And asking one type of salesperson to be another is really difficult to do. That's like asking a point guard to be the center. Yeah, they can do it. There's some cases of that work really well. But for the most part, you are what you are. Another type of thing to think about is, are you alone? Do you need lone wolves? Most people say they don't need lone wolves in their organization. This is very much from the Challenger book, or from the Challenger sale. They talk about lone wolf. Lone wolf was the person who they just got it done. And they're great for an organization that doesn't give them any help. And they just accept the fact that there's no help coming from the company. We're not going to have a marketing department. We're not going to spend money on that. We're not going to spend infrastructure on that. Just go figure it out. That's a very much a lone wolf mentality. So if that's how you want to treat your sales team, then you need lone wolves, or you need challengers. And challengers are those people that actually take the customer by the hand and just walk them through a very complicated sell. Not so great for a short, easy sell, transactional sell. The point of all of this is you don't need whatever walked in the door when you hired a salesperson. You need to be very intentional about the type of salesperson that you want in your organization. Now, the big challenge, and let's talk about this a little bit, Kevin, you've got a team. You didn't pay attention to that. The team is there, and turnover sucks. So it's not like you want to fire all your hunters because you need more farmers. So what do you do then, Kevin? How do we help that owner work through that process of, I need to do a facelift on my team?
So the how is a very big conversation, more than 15 minutes. So to dive into this heavily, we're going to have office hours on the B2B Sales Lab where we dig into this specific topic. Because if you're a salesperson out there and if everyone acts like you on your team, you've either got a very focused market or your CEO and owner, VP of sales, has hired PLUs, the people like us thinking. And that's important to know because risk of turning over a team is customer attrition risk. And turning over a team is a very unpopular way of saying replacing everybody. And whether you like that or not, it's a reality. If your sales are slumping, if your sales are flat, you've probably got a structural process or lack of process on your team. So the how you do it is not ripping Band-Aids. We're not going to fire a bunch of people. We're going to try and upskill people, change people before you have to change people thinking. Notice the rising and falling inflection of my voice. I'm talking about upskilling people so that they can do the job you need them to do. Because sometimes the disconnect is really just that. It's a disconnect. People may not know what they need to do, which is an infrastructure and leadership problem. But if you've got a bunch of lone wolves trying to close a lot of relationship sales and you don't have anybody to backfill that relationship and maintain it, you may just need to hire more. Your growth edge may be continuing to sell more net new logos. I'm giving my thumbs up okay sign on that. What you may need to do as a owner is invest in account managers, not account executives, customer service reps that do the hand holding and the fielding of the calls and the tech support and those kind of things. So you have to take an intellectually honest approach to the makeup of your team. Do I have a bunch of hunters or people that are hard to manage or people who really buck the system when it comes to discipline with CRM hygiene and they think about the customers as their customers, not the company's customers? That's a lone wolf kind of recognition behavior versus a farmer who really probably doesn't like prospecting. If you've got people who don't like prospecting on your team, they're probably great candidates for account management and customer service, but you can't pay them like account executives. I'm going to let that sink in for a minute. Your compensation plans need to be aligned to the roles. If somebody is there and exists to serve and pick up the phone when it rings and give customer service and you can hear them smiling on the phone or in the email, that's a different compensation plan than an account executive who is charged to go and hunt and risk a lot of compensation based on their ability to close a new relationship. People with call reluctance are often people that are in the wrong role. So if you're an EOS disciple, this is a right person, right seat discussion. If you're in a scaling up, this is another label. But the idea is that we want our HR plan to match our sales and forecast of productivity goals.
And then if you do find yourself in this situation where you need a specific person to have a specific skill and they need to do it a little bit better. So if you want to take your hunter and say, okay, we need you to manage as well because we just don't have the resources. We're not profitable enough. We're not big enough in order to have more people to fill in their gaps of their personalities. You need to figure out how to teach them and how to get them to grow. And some of the things that you can do are for a hunter, you can say, make it a game for going to prospect because they don't like to prospect. So make it a game, make challenges, make things that they can accomplish and they can feel good about it. Because chances are they don't like to prospect because they don't know how to prospect. And therefore that's just a challenge. And they fell into the role of, I'm just going to be a farmer. If I'm going to be a hunter, I fell into that role because I was only being graded on how many deals did I close this week? How many deals did I close this month? And I wasn't ever graded on how do I keep a customer happy, right? So once again, teach them the skills that they don't know because that's probably what they're avoiding to become better. And the number one skill that I encourage every salesperson to think about is, how do you become proactive? How do you plan for the deal that's going to happen in 9 months? How do you set your customer up from, I did a pilot project today, I did a departmental project next week at the company, now I'm going to do a divisional project in 3 months, and now I'm going to have the right to go after the big deal and get all of the company using my product. And that's an enterprise level project. But that's going to take me a year to pull off. How do you become proactive to do that? Because it takes all of those skills. It takes hunting, it takes leading, it takes being a challenger. You got to walk your customer through it. All of that stuff has to happen if you are going to get truly big, massive deals. And so the best person is the person that can do all of that. And I call that a trapper, which is the stereotype that I used in my book, Eliminate Your Competition. So I think we're at the end of our time, Kevin. It's been great talking about this. We probably should talk about this more often in the future, because I think there's a lot of stuff we can dig into here. So if you are interested in that, make sure you hit subscribe on the buttons on your podcast player. Come back, see us again, and learn more about how to grow your business. And if you really want to talk to us, go check out the B2B Sales Lab. The URL for that is in the show notes.
That was a sharp episode because it went after a sales leadership problem that hides in plain sight. Not every salesperson is built for the same selling motion. One thing I learned today was how dangerous it can be to confuse a seller's type with the company's business model. A hunter may be great at opening doors, but if the business depends on long-term relationship expansion, that same strength can become a weakness without the right account management structure behind it. Likewise, a farmer may protect and grow existing customers beautifully, but struggle if the job really requires constant prospecting into new accounts. The significant action item from this episode is to audit your current sales team against the sales motion your business actually requires. Do that today, before the rush of daily business pushes it aside, because misaligned roles quietly damage pipeline, forecasting, compensation, customer retention, and revenue generation. Ask the hard question: are your people failing, or have you put capable people in roles that do not fit the way your customers buy? If you ever need help with sales, sales management, or simply growing your company, reach out to Sean or Kevin. Their contact information is available in the show notes. You can also join the B2B Sales Lab, a community of salespeople and sales leaders who help each other succeed, answer real sales questions, and share practical resources to help members make their quota. The link to the B2B Sales Lab is also in the show notes, so take a look and get involved. Make sure you subscribe to Two Tall Guys Talking Sales on your favorite podcast player, so you do not miss next week's conversation when Sean and Kevin are back again, Tuesday afternoon at 4:30 Eastern. Happy selling!